Okay, assignment number 2. What I want you to do is go to a Google. First off, you're going to need to Google a multiplication chart. And Google multiplication chart, and then let's just go 1 through 25. Okay. Okay, so you can see it right there. I know it's not as easy as if you have the actual paper, but you're just going to have to go with it, okay? Go with what you got. Actually, click on this one. This one's a better one, the one where they go down the rows, okay? Because we will need that. Okay, first off, I want you to tear off a sheet of paper, and then you can throw it in your trash can when you're done with this, but I want you to write a few things. I want you to write the word quadratic equation. Remember what that means. That means it has an x to the second power. It means it has 2 answers, and so forth. Okay, that's what you need to write. Now, we've already went over this. I do want you to write it down. When you have an x squared and there's a number in front of it known as the a term, plus an x and a number in front of it known as a b term, and then that's all you need for that one. Now, to solve these, we've already actually solved these before we left for this whole hiatus and this whole ordeal. Okay. Step 1, you have to make sure the equation's equal to 0, and then step 2, you do the space parentheses with your GCF, okay? Now today what you are going to see is a new type of equation, and it is x to the second, okay, ax to the second, because it'll always be x to the second, but we're going to put a 1 there, okay? Plus, there's going to be an x with a b in front of it, and then there's going to be a c, okay, that doesn't have an x at all. And to solve these, you're going to go equals 0, okay. Then you're going to do your GCF, maybe, okay. I say maybe, but you're at least going to see if there's a GCF. Then there's a third step where you're going to make a table, and you're going to make parentheses after the table's over, okay. So get that down. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, line, GCF, then the table, and this is how we're always going to be solving ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so have that out. And here's your directions in the examples, okay? Solve the equation. Okay. And then make your little, kind of separate your work so it's not all over the place. So the first equation is one you've seen before. Negative 4x plus 1 equals 3x plus 5. Okay, here I only have x to the first powers. There's no exponents, so that means they're to the first. So there's just one answer. That means it's a linear equation. Okay, there's one answer. Pick one of your x's to get rid of. We'll get rid of the negative 4x. We'll get that to 0. So plus 4x plus 4x. So we have 1 equals 7x plus 5. Then we get rid of the plus 5, subtract 5. 1 minus 5 is negative 4 equals 7x. Then I would divide both sides by 7, and that would be negative 4 sevenths. That would be your one solution, okay? Now, then right before we left, we did another one, okay? The example is negative 3x to the second power plus 9x equals 0. Now, there are 2 answers to this because you have x to the second. Those have 2 answers. And you have an a and you have a b. There's no c. So I solve it with the ax squared plus bx. I make sure I'm equal to 0, which I am. I don't need to move anything. Then I set up my GCF. Now I actually do that in a box, okay, and I also put equals 0. Make a box around that in your notes and put equals 0 here. And right there as well. Forgot to tell you that, okay. So I make a box, I put the equals 0 outside the box, and I need to rewrite this in factored form. Now remember how you determine a GCF, okay? 3 and 9 on your multiplication chart, okay? So in the third row I see 3, I see 9, so I would do a 3, okay? 3. So it would need to be a negative because my first number is negative. I have x to the second and x to the first, so I need to take the smaller x, okay? Then I go up here and divide both of these by the negative 3x. And we can cancel out the x's right there. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. X to the second power divided by x is x. And then 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3, so I'm going to write minus 3. Okay, so then what I do to get my two answers, I put a parentheses. This is F1, this is F2. So I set each of those expressions equal to 0. Okay, so that means negative 3 times x. I need to divide by negative 3. And 0 divided by any number is 0. So 0 is your first solution. Then we plus 3, 1x equals 3. Divide by 1, or just get rid of the 1 because it's still 3. So 0 and 3 are the two solutions. Okay, now, the next problem, we have x to the second power plus 5x minus 14 equals 0. Okay, now, you know there are two answers, and these are the problems you're going to be working here today. These types of problems here. We have an A. Now the A is a 1. I'm not going to put a 1 there, but A is 1. Okay? And then I've got B is 5, and there's a C without an X, negative 14. Okay? So here are the steps I take to solve this particular problem. Okay? And I'm going to use 2 boxes here. I'm going to use 4 boxes for one problem. Okay? First thing I do is make sure you're equal to 0, which in this problem we are, okay? And then make your GCF box. Then after you've made that, you're going to make another box, okay, with a T table, okay? All right, now let's talk about our GCF, okay? So the GCF, that's a 1. I would put a 1 there. So we got 1, 5, and 14. Okay? Well, if I look up my multiplication chart, I see 1, 5, and 14. Those are in the first row. So the GCF's 1, but we got x to the second, we have x to the first, then we don't have an x at all. Okay? So I would not have an x at all. And dividing by 1 is kind of stupid without an x, okay? Reason it's kind of dumb is because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't help simplify the problem. So if you have a GCF of 1, okay, get rid of that box. Skip that step. Now, after that, here's what you're going to do. You're going to take your A times your C. You're going to take positive 1 times negative 14, and that's negative 14. Now, since I have a negative up there, it's going to be a positive and a negative. Okay, if I have a positive, it's going to be a negative and a negative to start with. And then I'm going to add to try to get to positive 5. So I start dividing 14. 14 divided by 1 is 14. I add those, that is not even close to positive 5. Okay. Then I divide 14 by 2, and I get 7. If I add those, that's negative 5. Well, I have the right number. I just need it to be positive 5. So we're going to go plus 7 and minus 2. Now it's just switch them, okay? Now, if my A is a 1, I'm going to now get rid of the 1, okay? And I make 2 parentheses and then x, x. So minus 2 plus 7. Now I put the equals 0 here, and I have F1 and F2. So F1, x minus 2 could equal 0. F2, x plus 7 could equal 0. So I add 2 to both sides, and that would be 2. I don't need to divide. Then I subtract 7 from both sides, and that would be negative 7. So those are the two solutions to this quadratic equation. Okay, my next example. I've got x to the second power minus 11x plus 24 equals 0. X to the second minus 11x plus 24 equals 0. Okay, so there are two answers. Put them down here. We're going to use this, we're going to use 4 boxes for the same problem. Okay, so now if there's two answers, label your A. We'll put a 1 there, a B, and a C. Okay, that's what you're going to have. Okay, so if I got an A, a B, and a C, I want to first make sure you're equal to 0, which you are. Then I want to make 2 boxes. Okay, one for the GCF, just in case. I want to get in the habit of doing that. Put equals 0 outside. Then a longer box. And what I do is I make a T table on the top half of that box, and on the bottom half I'm going to make my parentheses. Okay. Now GCF, I've got 1, 11, 24. Those all three have to appear in the same row, and they just would appear in the first row, 1, 11, and 24. If 1 is one of your numbers, it's going to be 1. Okay, I can tell you that. Then we have x to the second, x to the first, but then we have this 24 without an x, so GCF's just 1. We wouldn't put an x with it, so get rid of that. You're not going to do the GCF on any of these, okay, today. Later, yeah. Then I take my A times my C, okay, just the numbers in front. So I take 1 times 24. That would be 24. Now it's positive 24. So it's positive 24, the signs have to match. So negative, negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive. We can always switch it to positive times plus, plus if we have to. We need to add 2 factors of positive 24 that make negative 11. Okay, they have to add to negative 11. So I start dividing. 24 divided by 1 is 24. If I add those, it's negative 25. Cross it out. If I divide 24 by 2, I get 12. Well, that's negative 14. If I divide by 3, I get 8. Well, that's negative 11. And I want it to be negative 11. So don't change the signs. Now, if your A is a 1, you can get rid of it. And now you can just make your 2 parentheses. Okay? And you rewrite this now. You know what you can rewrite it as. You can rewrite it as x minus xx minus 3 minus 8. And then F1, F2. So F1, x minus 3 could equal 0. F2, x minus 8 could equal 0. So we add 3. So I get 3. Then I add 8. And I get 8. So 3 and 8 are my 2 answers. Okay. Those are the answers to the problem right there. Okay, next problem. X to the second plus 6x equals 55. Just like that. So there are 2 answers. Okay, just like that. Use 4 boxes on this assignment. Okay. So there's an A, there's a B, and there's a C. So again, I want to use this method. First, you got to have equals 0, though. Okay? You don't have 0. See, on the first 2, you had 0 right away, so you could just go make your boxes, but you need 0. So what you do, you get rid of that 55 and you put 0. Then to get a 55 to 0, I'd have to minus 55. Okay? But you see, 55 can't go with 1x to the second. It would have to have x to the second. It also can't go with 6x. It would have to have that to do that. Okay? So you put minus 55 afterwards. Okay? So now you have 1x to the second plus 6x minus 55 equals 0. Okay? Now you can go into your boxes. So I have the GCF box. And then I make my big box where I split the big box in half. I put a T on one half, and then down at the bottom is when I figure this out, I make parentheses. So 1, 6, and 55 is just going to be 1, okay? X to the second, X to the first, and then that doesn't have an X, so it just stays at 1. So I'm not going to do anything there. So now I go ABC. I take 1 times negative 55. That's negative 55. So it's a negative, so it's a positive times a negative. The signs have to be the opposite. That's how you multiply to a negative, is by multiplying two numbers of the opposite side. Okay, and we're adding to try to get to plus 6. So 55 divided by 1 would be 55. If I add those, that's not anywhere as close to 6. Now, what happens if I divide 55 by 2? That's a decimal, okay? So I don't use 2. After 2 comes 3. I got a decimal. After 3 comes 4, decimal. After 4 comes 5. Okay, I got 11. How about 5 and 11? What does that add to? That adds to negative 6. I need it to be plus 6, though. Well, I can accomplish that if I just make that a plus and that a negative. Okay, now it adds to plus 6. Okay, now I make my parentheses. If A is 1, get rid of it. If it's not a 1, there's something you have to do, but that won't come up today. So you make two parentheses, and you just go x minus 5 and x plus 11. And you got your F1, F2 that way. So x minus 5 could equal 0, x plus 11 could equal 0. So the opposite of minus 5 is plus 5. 0 plus 5 is 5. The opposite of plus 11 is minus 11. 0 minus 11 is negative 11. So 5 and negative 11 are the two solutions. Okay, let's keep her rolling here. I've got x to the second plus x minus 6 equals 0. Again, it's a quadratic equation, so there are two answers. Okay. Now, what kind of a quadratic? Well, we got ax to the second, bx, and c. So ABC, I'm looking at this. First, I make sure we're equal to 0, which we are. So now I set up my boxes. Okay. First, I see if I can do a GCF, and then I make my table. Split that table, make a T-chart up there. That's how to organize your work. Okay. GCF, okay. 1, 1, and 6 would just be 1, and they have x to the second, x at first, but he doesn't have an x, so if the C doesn't have an x, we're not going to do that. Okay. Now, I take my A times my C. Okay. So that's going to be 1 times negative 6. It's negative 6. So it's a negative. To multiply to a negative, you need a positive times a negative. And those two factors have to add to what's in the middle. So they have to add to positive 1. Now start dividing. 6 divided by 1 is 6. That adds to negative 5. That won't work. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now that adds to negative 1. To get it to add to positive 1, we just go plus 3 and minus 2. We just switch the positive negative. Now if A is 1, you can get rid of that, okay, and make just two parentheses. After your parentheses, put equals 0. So x to the second, so that's xx minus 2 plus 3. So F1, F2. So x minus 2 could equal 0, or x plus 3 could equal 0. So I plus 2, and I get 2. I subtract 3, and I get negative 3. Okay. All right, next problem. X to the second plus 3x equals 18. Two answers. Label your A as 1, your B as 3, and then your C is 18. Now, you need to get this equal to 0, okay? If we don't have equals to 0, here is what I would recommend. Go blank x to the second, give yourself some room. Blank x second plus blank x plus blank equals 0. So that's my a right there. So your a is 1, the b is 3. Now the c is 18, but you need to move the 18. You just need to switch it from positive 18 to negative 18. Okay? Just switch it. Okay? Now I can make my boxes, GCF, and then my box where I split it in half with the t. Okay, 1, 3, and 18 would just be 1. Okay, x squared, x to the first, and then no x at all means we can't put an x out there. So that means that GCF's not worth doing, because dividing by 1 is going to just keep it the same. It doesn't help us. So I take my a times my c. You always do that before you go to your t table. Your a times your c. So 1 times negative 18 is negative 18. So that's a positive times a negative. And we're trying to add to positive 3. So divide 18 by 1, I get 18. That does not add to positive 3. Divide 18 by 2, you get 9. That does not add to positive 3. Divide 18 by 3, you get 6. Okay, that adds to negative 3, so I'm done dividing. I just need to switch the sign so it makes positive 3. Plus 6 minus 3. Now your a is a 1, get rid of the 1. Okay, you had it there, it served its purpose, so make 2 parentheses with the equals 0, and you're going to rewrite this. That can be rewritten as xx, and then the rest of the expression is minus 3 plus 6. You're unmultiplying it is essentially what you're doing. So f1, f2. So x minus 3 could equal 0, x plus 6 could equal 0. So I add 3, and I got 3. Minus 6, 0 take away 6 is negative 6. Okay. Okay, next problem. We've got x to the second minus 2x equals 24. So there are two answers because it's a quadratic equation. That's the way when we have x to the second. Okay, here's my a, here's my b, here's my c. But we don't have this equal to 0, so I go blank x second plus blank x plus blank equals 0. So what do you have for a? You have a 1 on this side. B, you have a negative 2. And C, you got 24, but it's on the wrong side. Well, if I move it over, it becomes negative 24. So there's what I'm trying to factor. So GCF and my T box, okay? So GCF. 1, 2, and 24, GCF's 1. Now again, we got x to the second, x to the first, and then not an x at all. So we can't put an x there, okay? Because that doesn't have an x to divide from, so we won't be doing the GCF. Okay, so I take positive 1 times negative 24. That's going to be negative 24. So it's negative, so that's a positive times a negative. And we're trying to add to get to negative 2. The two factors have to add to negative 2. So if I divide 24 by 1, I get 24. That doesn't add to negative 2. If I divide by 24 by 2, I get 12. Nope. Divide by 24 by 3, we get 8. Nope. Divide 24 by 4, and we get 6. Okay, right there, 4 and negative 6 adds to negative 2. We found it, okay? And I want it to be negative 2, so I leave the signs. Okay, if a is 1, you can go up, get rid of it. So I make 2 parentheses, okay? So xx plus 4 minus 6. Plus 4 minus 6. F1, F2. Because if you multiplied that out, you would get back to here. So x plus 4 could equal 0, x minus 6 could equal 0. So we minus 4. 0 minus 4 is negative 4. And then we plus 6. 0 plus 6 is 6. So those are your two answers, negative 4 and 6. Okay, 4 more. X is second plus 8 equals 6x. So there would be two answers. You got A. This is not a B, okay? The B has to have x, regular x to the first connected. This is a C here, okay? B is over here. Again, it's AX to the A is in front of x the second, B is in front of x, then C won't have anything. You're not equal to 0, so you have to rewrite the equation. Okay, x second, I got 1. Now x, I have 6, but it's on the wrong side. I need to bring the 6 over here. It would just go to negative 6. And then my c is 8. I don't need to change the sign because it's on this side of the equation. Okay, so it stays 8. Now I'm good to go. A plus b, c equals 0. That's always how it has to be written. Okay, so I make those boxes, so GCF is 1 again. Whenever 1's one of the three numbers, it's going to be 1. Then we have x to the second, x to the first, and no x, so we will not be doing the GCF. Okay, then I take my a times my c. So 1 times 8 is 8. Now it's positive 8 this time. So that means the signs have to be the same. We'll go negative, negative. We can always switch it to plus, plus if we have to. Okay. Again, when I get a negative right there, I do plus negative. When I get a positive, I'll do negative, negative. And I'm trying to add to get to negative 6. So 8 divided by 1 is 8. That's negative 9. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and that's negative 6. So, and it's negative, I want it to be negative. Now if a is a 1, get rid of it. Make 2 parentheses, okay? X minus 2 minus 4. Okay, so x minus 2 could equal 0, or x minus 4 could equal 0. Then I add 2, I get 2. Plus 4, we get 4. 2 and 4. Okay, next example. X to the second minus 15x equals negative 8x minus 10. Stick to the plan here. Okay, there are two answers. Okay, it's a quadratic equation. And this is A. If it has x without a power, it's B. If it has x without a power, we have another B. And then this C right there. So we're not equal to 0. Not only that, we have two B's that we'll need to combine. We'll show you how to do that here. Okay, so x is second, we got 1. Now B, there's two B's. Okay, well we need to combine them. We need to take the one that's over here and add 8x, and then I add 8x under there. Okay. So I take negative 15 plus 8. Not just 15 plus 8, it's negative 15 plus 8. I got negative 7. Okay, then C. Okay, remember this is A, this is B, this is C. So you just have one C, but it's on the wrong side. You just need to move it over here. It goes from a negative 10 to a positive 10, and now we're ready to roll. Okay, so GCF. And my table followed by the parentheses. So GCF, 1, 7, and 10 would just be 1. X second, X first, and that doesn't have an X, so we can't do an X, okay? So if I can't do an X and there's only a 1, we're not going to do it, because dividing everything by 1 is stupid. It doesn't change it. Okay? Then I go 1 times 10. It's positive 10. Okay. So it's positive, so that'll be a negative negative. We are adding to try to get to negative 7. So 10 divided by 1 is 10. Nope. Divide 10 by 2, you get 5. Bam, that's negative 7. So I go look up what's in front of the x. If it's 1, just get rid of it, because we're going to write that as x times x. So x, 2 parentheses, minus 2, minus 5. Okay? So x minus 2 could equal 0, or x minus 5 could equal 0. So plus 2, I get 2. Plus 5, I get 5. So 2 and 5 are the two solutions. Okay, next one. X to the second power minus 8 equals negative 13x plus 6. Again, you're finding the two answers to the quadratic equation. So we have our A, 1. That's a C. It doesn't have an X. It's a C. That doesn't have an X. That's a C. Now, X's would be B. Remember, X squareds are A's, X's are B's, constants, numbers without X's are C's. Okay? But you have to rewrite this so it equals 0. So this is how I do this. Okay, A, I just have one A. It's a 1. It's where it's supposed to be, so I don't switch it. B, I have just this one B here, but it's on the wrong side of the equals. I need it to come over here. It'll switch to a positive 13. Then my C's, there's 2 of them, so take the one that's over here, get it to 0 by subtraction, and then I can subtract it from the negative 8. Remember, it's negative 8 minus 6. Negative 14. Okay, so that's A, B, C. Now I go to my graphic organizers. And I know the graphic organizers, but it can be a pain to write. So 1, 13, and 14, that's just 1. X squared X and nothing, so it's just 1 is the GCF. If that's all I can find for a GCF is 1 without an X, without anything else, get rid of it. So I take 1 times negative 14, that's negative 14. So it's a negative, so I label that as a positive times a negative. I'm trying to add to get to plus 13. Divide by 1, you get 14. Now that's 13 right there, negative 13, but I need it plus 13. So I go plus, negative. Okay, A is a 1, so you may eliminate the 1. If that's like not a 1, you can't eliminate it. But 1's in front of x squared can be eliminated because I make 2 parentheses, and that's x, x. So minus 1 plus 14. So F1, F2. So I add 1 to both sides, I get 1. Subtract 14 from both sides, I get negative 14. So 1, negative 14. Okay, one more. X to the second plus 22 equals negative 23x. So it's a quadratic, it has 2 answers. You got A, B, and C. Remember, A's are x squareds, B's are x's, C's are numbers without x's. But you got to get this equal to 0. Any A, B, C, S be equal to 0, similar to when any A, B, S be equal to 0. Okay, so A, B, C. So A, I got a 1. B, I got negative 23, but that's on the wrong side, so when it comes over here, it's positive 23, and then you got 22. Okay, now set up your boxes. GCF and my table. GCF, like all the rest of the problems, is 1, which means you shouldn't even be messing around in that. Okay, 1 times 22 is 22. Positive. So it's a positive, we'll go negative, negative. You can either go negative negatives or positive positive. It doesn't matter. Okay, you can always switch the signs back. I usually go negative because negatives are easy to make into pluses. You just put a line through it. Okay, and we're adding the factors to try to come up with positive 23. 22 divided by 1 is 22. If I add those, that's negative 23. I need plus 23, which I can do if I go plus plus. Now it's positive 23. A is 1, okay? So if A is 1, get rid of it, because that's just x times x, plus 1 plus 22. Okay? So I go F1, F2, go from there. Subtract 1 from both sides, we get negative 1. Subtract 22 from both sides, we get negative 22. And we're good. Okay? Negative 1, negative 22.